Under the soft glow of my parents' dining room chandelier, surrounded by the people I had trusted my entire life, I raised my glass toward my grandfather and said the words that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. "Thank you, Grandpa, for the bicycle. It really helped me get back on my feet after the divorce. I meant it sincerely." The old 10-speed he had supposedly given me 8 months ago had become my lifeline, my daily transportation to work, my small symbol that someone in my family had thought of me during the darkest chapter of my life. But the moment those words left my mouth, something shifted in the room. Grandpa Harold's wine glass stopped mid-air. His warm smile collapsed into confusion, then something closer to alarm. "A bicycle," he repeated slowly. "Sweetheart, what bicycle?" "I gave you a Mercedes Benz." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against my plate. Across the table, my sister Lauren knocked over her water glass, the liquid spreading across the white tablecloth like an accusation. She shoved back from the table, muttered something about not feeling well, and fled toward the bathroom, her heels clicking frantically against the hardwood. The door slammed behind her, and I sat frozen, my pulse hammering against my ribs, staring at the faces of my parents and wondering how a simple thank you had just detonated a bomb I never knew existed. I looked at my mother first. Patricia Richardson, 58 years old, perfectly styled hair, pearl earrings, the picture of composed elegance. But her face had gone pale, her hand pressed flat against her chest, as if she were trying to hold something inside from spilling out. My father, Robert, sat rigid in his chair, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching beneath his skin. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them looked at me. Grandpa set down his wine glass carefully, as if afraid any sudden movement might break something beyond repair. "Patricia," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who had built a trucking empire from nothing. "Didn't you give Ella the car? I wired you $85,000 8 months ago. $85,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I had been riding a rusted bicycle through Portland rain for 8 months. I had been eating ramen twice a week to stretch my grocery budget. I had been working overtime just to cover rent on a studio apartment so small I could hear my neighbors sneeze through the walls. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. "Where is the car?" I whispered. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, thin and fragile. "If Grandpa gave you money for a car for me, where is it?" Dad cleared his throat. "This isn't the time or place, Ella. We can discuss this later as a family." "When is the time?" I demanded. "Where is my car? Where is the $85,000 that was supposed to help me?" Grandpa pulled out his phone, his weathered fingers moving across the screen with surprising speed. "I have the bank transfer right here," he said. "I have the email your mother sent thanking me." His voice had hardened, the confusion giving way to something darker. "Patricia, what exactly is going on?" I stood up from the table, suddenly unable to breathe. The walls of my childhood home felt like they were closing in, the familiar photographs on the walls now looking like evidence of a lie I had been living my entire life. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to understand how the people who raised me could have watched me struggle for 8 months while sitting on a small fortune that was meant to save me. I excused myself and stepped onto the back porch, the October air cutting through my thin sweater. The Portland night was cold and damp, typical for autumn, but I welcomed the chill. It was real. It was honest. Unlike everything that had just happened inside. 8 months ago, my life had fallen apart. My husband Michael had left me for a coworker, cleaning out our joint savings account on his way out the door. I moved back to Portland from Seattle with 2 suitcases and $847 to my name. I found a job at a marketing firm downtown. I rented the cheapest studio apartment I could find, and I told myself I was rebuilding, one day at a time. 3 weeks after I moved back, Mom had shown up at my door with an old bicycle she claimed Dad had found in their garage. She said Grandpa thought I might need it. I had been so touched by the gesture, so moved that someone in my family had remembered my childhood love of cycling. I rode that bicycle to work every single day, rain or shine, telling myself it was temporary, telling myself things would get better. And the whole time, $85,000 was sitting somewhere, designated for a Mercedes Benz with my name on it. I thought about all the family dinners over the past 8 months. The Sunday brunches where I showed up with helmet hair and damp clothes, the holiday gatherings where I parked my bicycle in their garage while everyone else pulled up in real cars. Not once had anyone mentioned a Mercedes. Not once had anyone asked why I was still riding a 10-speed when Grandpa had supposedly given me money for a luxury vehicle. But someone had mentioned a car. At Easter brunch 4 months ago, Lauren had arrived in a brand new silver Mercedes. She had been so proud of it, making sure everyone saw her pull into the driveway. When I asked about it, she said it was from Derek's bonus at work. Her husband, Derek, who hadn't held a steady job in 2 years. At the time, I didn't question it. Why would I? She was my sister. Now, the memory made my stomach turn. I forced myself to go back inside. Grandpa was standing now, a folder clutched in his hand. I didn't know when he had retrieved it, but the sight of actual physical documents made everything feel more real and more terrifying. Mom was crying quietly, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Dad had his arm around her protectively, a united front against whatever was coming. Lauren still hadn't returned from the bathroom. And Derek, I noticed, had vanished entirely. "I did everything right," Grandpa said, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. He showed me his phone, the bank transfer confirmation filling the screen. $85,000, wired to the Richardson family account. The memo line reading clearly, "For Ella's Mercedes, post-divorce fresh start." This was not a suggestion. This was not a family fund. This was specifically, explicitly for my granddaughter, to buy her a car. In her name. Mom let out a choked sob. "Dad, please, it's not what you think." "Then explain what it is, Patricia. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you took money I sent for Ella and used it for something else entirely." I couldn't stay silent anymore. The anger that had been building inside me finally found its voice. "Where is the money?" I asked, stepping toward my parents. "Where is the $85,000 Grandpa sent for me? And please, please don't lie to me again." Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the floor. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lauren needed it more than you did." The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, processing, trying to make sense of something that made no sense at all. My parents had received a gift specifically designated for me, specifically meant to help me recover from divorce, and they had given it to Lauren instead. While I rode a bicycle in the rain. While I counted pennies for groceries. While I worked 2 jobs some weeks just to keep my head above water. "You're the strong one, Ella," Mom continued, tears streaming down her face now. "You've always been able to handle things on your own. Lauren was drowning. She and Derek were in so much debt they were about to lose everything. We had to help her. We had to." Dad nodded stiffly. "It was a family decision. We did what we thought was best for everyone." "Everyone except me," I said. My voice was steady now, cold in a way I didn't recognize. I wasn't included in this family decision. I wasn't even told about Grandpa's gift. You took my money and gave it to Lauren, and never said a word. "We were going to tell you eventually," Mom pleaded. "We just needed time to figure things out." Grandpa slammed his folder down on the dining table, making everyone jump. "Eventually? You were going to tell her eventually? While she's been struggling for 8 months? While she's been riding a bicycle to work like a college student when she should have been driving a Mercedes?" I felt something break inside me. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet snap, like a thread that had been holding everything together finally giving way. I looked at my parents, at the house I grew up in, at the photographs on the walls showing smiling family moments that now felt staged and hollow. "I have to go," I said. "Ella, please." Mom reached for me. Let's talk about this." I stepped back, out of her reach. "I think you've said enough." I walked out the front door, down the driveway, to the car I had borrowed from a coworker because my bicycle had a flat tire. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, hands shaking, trying to breathe. My phone buzzed, a text from Grandpa. "Sweetheart, I couldn't sleep. I've been looking through my records. I found the original email chain with your mother. I found the bank statements. Everything is documented. Come to my house tomorrow morning. I'll show you everything. And Ella, I'm so sorry. I trusted them with your future. I should have given the money directly to you. We're going to fix this." I stared at the message until my vision blurred with tears. Not tears of sadness. Tears of being seen. After 8 months of struggling alone, someone finally believed me. Someone finally understood. I typed back with trembling fingers, "I'll be there at 9. Then I set down the phone, started the borrowed car, and drove toward my tiny apartment through the Portland night. Behind me, I left the house where I grew up, the family I thought I knew, and the version of myself who believed that being strong meant being invisible. Tomorrow I would see the evidence. Tomorrow I would understand the full scope of the betrayal. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, I let myself imagine what my life should have looked like, the car I should have been driving, the apartment I could have afforded, the fresh start that was stolen from me before I even knew it existed. And somewhere in the darkness between my parents' house and my own, I made a decision. I was done being the daughter who didn't ask questions. I was done being the sister who made sacrifices no one noticed. I was done being strong for everyone except myself. Whatever they had done with my money, whatever lies they had told, I was going to find out the truth. And then I was going to take back everything they stole from me. The drive to Lake Oswego took 25 minutes, but it felt like hours. I had barely slept, maybe 2 hours total, my mind replaying the dinner scene on an endless loop. Grandpa's confused face, Lauren fleeing the table, Mom's tearful confession that they had given my money to my sister because I was strong enough to handle being robbed. The October mist hung low over Portland as I navigated the familiar route, passing landmarks from my childhood that now felt like props in a play I had never understood. I passed the coffee shop where Grandpa used to take me for hot chocolate when I was little. I passed the park where he taught me to ride a bike, back when riding a bike was a joy and not a daily reminder of what had been stolen from me. Every turn I made carried memories, but those memories felt different now, tainted, like photographs that had been secretly altered, and I was only just noticing the changes. My hands gripped the steering wheel of the borrowed car too tightly. The coffee I had poured at home sat untouched in the cup holder, cold now. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Dark circles under her eyes, tension in her jaw. The face of someone who had just discovered that trust was a luxury she could no longer afford. Grandpa's neighborhood in Lake Oswego was quiet and affluent, the kind of place where old money lived in comfortable craftsman homes behind manicured lawns. His house sat at the end of Maple Ridge Drive, a classic Pacific Northwest craftsman built in 1942. The cedar shingles had weathered to a beautiful silver gray over the decades. The wide wraparound porch still held the wind chimes Grandma had hung 30 years ago, their gentle music carrying across the morning air. I pulled into the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage. Whatever waited inside that house would change everything. There would be no going back to the comfortable ignorance I had lived in for 8 months. Part of me wanted to drive away, to pretend last night had never happened, to keep believing that my family loved me equally. But that part was getting smaller by the minute. The front door opened before I could even reach the porch steps. Grandpa Harold stood in the doorway, dressed in pressed khakis and a flannel shirt despite the early hour. He looked older than he had last night, the weight of betrayal visible in the stoop of his shoulders and the shadows under his eyes. But his gaze was sharp and clear, and when he saw me, something in his expression softened. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice cracking slightly on the word. He pulled me into a hug that lasted longer than usual, and I breathed in the familiar scent of him. Coffee and Old Spice and something like sawdust from the workshop he still puttered around in. For just a moment, I felt like a child again, safe, believed, seen. "Come inside," he murmured against my hair. "We have a lot to discuss." The house looked the same as it always had. The same hardwood floors, the same grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same photographs lining the walls. Pictures of my father as a boy. Pictures of me and Lauren as children, gap-toothed and grinning. Pictures of Grandma before the cancer took her 5 years ago. I had always loved these walls, this history. Now I wondered how many of these smiling moments had hidden uglier truths. Grandpa led me to the living room, where 2 cups of tea waited on the coffee table. Chamomile, my favorite. He had remembered without asking, but my attention caught on what else lay on that table. A thick manila folder, a laptop open to what looked like an email thread, a yellow legal pad covered in his handwriting. He had been working on this all night. "Sit down, Ella," he said, gesturing to the couch. "I need to show you everything." I sat, my hands folding automatically in my lap. Grandpa settled into the armchair across from me. The same armchair where he used to read me stories when I was small. He picked up the manila folder but didn't open it yet. Instead, he looked at me with an expression I had never seen from him before. Sorrow mixed with fury, held in check by decades of business discipline. "I couldn't sleep last night," he began. "After what happened at dinner, after seeing your face when you realized what they had done, I went through every record I have, every email, every bank statement, every piece of correspondence with your parents over the last year." He opened the folder and pulled out the first document. It was a printed email, dated 8 months ago in February. "This is what I sent to your mother," he said, and began to read aloud. "Patricia, I've been thinking about Ella since hearing about the divorce. I want to help her get back on her feet. I'm wiring $85,000 to the family account. Please use it to purchase a reliable car in Ella's name. Something safe, something that will last. I was thinking a Mercedes Benz, the C-Class, perhaps. She deserves something nice after everything she's been through. Let me know when it's done. Love, Dad." The words blurred as my eyes began to sting. Grandpa had wanted me to have something nice. Not just transportation, dignity, a fresh start. He had been thinking about me, worrying about me, trying to help me during the worst period of my life. And my parents had taken that love and redirected it. "Your mother replied the same day," Grandpa continued, pulling out another sheet. He read her words in a flat, controlled voice. "Dad, this is so generous. Ella will be thrilled. Robert and I will handle everything. We'll take her to the dealership next week. Thank you for always taking care of our girls." "She said she would take me to the dealership," I whispered. My voice sounded strange, distant. "She said I would be thrilled. She never took you anywhere, did she?" "No." I shook my head slowly. "She brought me a bicycle 3 weeks later, said it was from you." Grandpa closed his eyes briefly, pain flickering across his weathered face. When he opened them again, they were hard. A bicycle. They took $85,000 meant for a Mercedes and gave you a bicycle. He turned his laptop toward me, showing me the online banking portal. The transaction history glowed on the screen, stark and undeniable. Wire transfer, $85,000, dated February 16th. Recipient, Richardson family account. Memo line, for Ella's Mercedes Benz, post-divorce fresh start, $85,000. More money than I had ever had in my account at one time. Money that could have changed everything about the past 8 months. I could have had a real apartment instead of that cramped studio. I could have had savings instead of living paycheck to paycheck. I could have had dignity instead of showing up to work soaking wet from riding a bicycle in the rain. 2 weeks after I sent the money, Grandpa said, "I texted your mother asking how the car shopping went." He showed me his phone, scrolling to an old message thread. Her reply was right there in black and white. "All done, Dad. Ella is so happy." She cried when she saw it. "Thank you so much. You made her year." I cried when I saw it, I repeated, a hollow laugh escaping my throat. I cried when I saw a rusty bicycle, Grandpa. Because I thought you remembered I liked riding bikes as a kid. I thought it was sweet. Thoughtful. I thought you were driving a Mercedes, he said quietly. Every time I saw you over the past 8 months, I assumed you had parked somewhere nearby. I never thought to ask because why would I? She told me it was done. He removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture I recognized from childhood. He always did that when he was trying to control his emotions. When Grandma died, he had done it constantly. I believed her, he said. I believed my own daughter. For 8 months, I thought you were safe and comfortable in a reliable car, rebuilding your life. I had no idea you were struggling. I reached across the space between us and took his hand. His skin felt papery and cool, the hands of a man approaching 80 who had just discovered that his family was built on lies. This isn't your fault, Grandpa. You trusted them. That's not a crime. He shook his head. But that's not all I found last night, sweetheart. There's more. He slid another document across the table. An email from 4 months ago. A routine check-in, he explained, where he had asked Mom how I was enjoying the car. Her reply made my blood run cold. She loves it, Mom had written. Uses it every day. Best gift you ever gave her, Dad. She's doing so much better now. 4 months ago. Mom had written those words 4 months ago, long after she knew the truth. Long after she had given my car to Lauren, long after she had watched me struggle and decided that lying was easier than confessing. She had multiple chances to make it right, multiple opportunities to tell the truth, and she had chosen to deceive Grandpa again and again. She looked me in the eye for 8 months, I said, my voice trembling with anger I could barely contain. She watched me show up to family dinners with wet hair from the rain. She never said a word. She thanked you for me. She said I cried. Grandpa's expression had shifted from grief to something harder. Determination. The same look I had seen in old photographs from when he was building his trucking company, facing down competitors and obstacles with sheer force of will. I need to ask you something, he said slowly. And I need you to think carefully before you answer. Anything. Easter brunch, 4 months ago. Do you remember what car Lauren was driving? The question hit me like a physical blow. The memory surfaced immediately, clear and damning. Lauren pulling into the driveway in a brand new silver Mercedes. Lauren making sure everyone noticed, parking right in front of the house where no one could miss it. Lauren preening as relatives admired the sleek lines and expensive features. She said it was from Derek's bonus, I whispered. Her husband's bonus from work. Derek hasn't had steady employment in 2 years, Grandpa said flatly. He opened a browser tab on his laptop and navigated to the Mercedes Benz website. He pulled up an image of the C-Class model and turned the screen toward me. Did it look like this? My stomach dropped. The car on the screen was identical to the one Lauren had been driving. Silver, sleek, expensive. The exact car Grandpa had wanted to buy for me. Yes, I breathed. Exactly like that. The picture crystallized with sickening clarity. My parents had received $85,000 designated for my car. They had purchased a Mercedes Benz. And they had put it in Lauren's name instead of mine. My sister had been driving my car for months, flaunting it at family gatherings while I pedaled through puddles on a rusted bicycle. They didn't just keep the money, I said, the words feeling like broken glass in my throat. They didn't just fail to help me. They bought the car and gave it to Lauren. My car, my gift, my fresh start. They handed it to her like I don't exist. Grandpa stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the garden Grandma had planted so many decades ago. His hands were clasped behind his back, the posture he always adopted when making difficult decisions. This wasn't negligence, he said, his voice low and dangerous. This was theft. Planned, deliberate theft. From my granddaughter, using my money. He turned back to face me, and I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before, not just anger, resolve. I failed you, Ella. I trusted the wrong people with your future, and I failed you. But I'm going to fix this. Whatever it takes. Lawyers if necessary. Court if it comes to that. Grandpa, I don't want to destroy the family. He crossed back to where I sat and took both my hands in his. They destroyed it the moment they stole from you. You're just finally seeing the wreckage. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. The wind chimes sang softly on the porch. The weight of everything that had been revealed settled around us like dust after an explosion. What do we do now? I finally asked. Grandpa released my hands and began gathering the documents from the coffee table. First, I want you to confront your parents. Get their full story. Make them say out loud what they did and why. And then we decide whether to handle this privately or legally. But Ella, he fixed me with a stern gaze, don't let them gaslight you. Don't let them claim this was a misunderstanding. You have proof, black and white, undeniable. He handed me copies of everything, the emails, the bank statements, the text messages, physical evidence of the betrayal I had only sensed before. Stay calm when you talk to them, he advised. Don't yell. They'll use your anger against you. Ask direct questions. Demand direct answers. And remember, if they try to make you the villain, they are the ones who stole. They are the ones who lied. You are the one who was wronged. I gathered the documents into the folder, my hands no longer shaking. The fear and confusion of last night had transformed into something harder. Clarity, purpose, righteous anger that demanded answers. Call me the moment you leave their house, Grandpa said as he walked me to the door. Whatever happens, I'm on your side, always. I hugged him one more time, breathing in the comfort of his presence. Then I walked to the borrowed car and placed the folder of evidence on the passenger seat. The morning fog had lifted, revealing a rare streak of October sun. I drove toward Beaverton, toward my parents' house, toward the confrontation I had been avoiding my entire life. My mind organized what I knew into a neat, damning list. Grandpa sent $85,000 for a car for me. Mom and Dad took the money. They bought a car and put it in Lauren's name. They lied to Grandpa for 8 months. They gave me a bicycle to cover their tracks. They watched me struggle and said nothing. But beyond the facts, a deeper pain burned in my chest. This wasn't really about the car or the money, it was about the choice. When given $85,000 to help their struggling daughter, they had chosen to give it to Lauren. Because Lauren was fragile and I was strong. Because Lauren needed help and I could handle it. Because I had spent 30 years being the daughter who never asked for anything, and they had decided that meant I didn't deserve anything. As I turned onto my parents' street, I saw Dad's truck in the driveway, Mom's sedan beside it, and parked directly in front of the house, gleaming in the morning light like a taunt, was a silver Mercedes Benz. Lauren was here. Of course she was. Probably strategizing with Mom and Dad all night, probably figuring out how to make me look like the unreasonable one. I parked behind the Mercedes and sat for a moment, staring at the car through my windshield. The car I was supposed to be driving. The car that was bought with my money, my gift, my grandfather's love. I reached out and touched the evidence folder beside me. Then I opened my door, stepped out, and walked toward my parents' house. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Lauren told us you might come by. Let's all talk calmly, okay? There's more to this than you know. I didn't reply. I just kept walking, past the Mercedes, trailing my fingers along its cold, smooth hood as I went. Then I climbed the porch steps and knocked on the door of my childhood home, ready to finally demand the truth. The door opened before my knuckles left the wood. Mom stood in the doorway, her eyes puffy from crying, but her chin lifted in that familiar posture of composed denial. She was wearing a pink cardigan and pearl earrings, her hair perfectly styled even in crisis. The armor of normalcy, as if looking put together, could somehow undo the chaos of what she had done. "Ella, sweetheart," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Come in, let's talk like a family." The smell hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. cinnamon rolls baking in the kitchen. Mom's go-to peacemaking tactic since I was a child. Every fight with Lauren, every bad grade, every disappointment had been smoothed over with warm pastry and the unspoken message that whatever was wrong could be fixed with enough sugar. I had fallen for it countless times over the years. Today, the manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. The living room tableau was exactly what I expected. Dad sat in his recliner, arms crossed over his chest, jaw clenched so tight I could see the tension radiating through his entire body. Lauren was curled up on the love seat, knees pulled to her chest, a tissue clutched in her hand like a prop. Derek was noticeably absent. He had apparently fled the scene rather than face whatever was coming. 3 against 1. Just like it had always been, really. The family united against the daughter who dared to ask uncomfortable questions. I didn't sit in the chair Mom gestured toward. Instead, I chose the seat nearest the door, positioning myself for a quick exit if needed. The folder of evidence rested on my lap like a shield. I could feel its weight, the paper edges pressing against my palms. Proof. Undeniable, documented proof of everything they had done. "Before you say anything," Mom began, settling onto the arm of the love seat near Lauren, "we want you to know we love you. This whole situation has been blown out of proportion. Your grandfather doesn't understand the full picture." Dad nodded stiffly. "What your mother is trying to say is that we made a family decision. Sometimes those decisions are complicated. You weren't in a good headspace back then, with the divorce and the move. We were trying to protect you." Lauren spoke through her tears, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "I'm so sorry, Ella. I never wanted you to find out this way. You have to understand, Derek and I were about to lose everything. I was so scared, I didn't know what else to do." I observed them carefully as they delivered their lines. Because that's exactly what they were. Lines, rehearsed talking points, too smooth and coordinated to be spontaneous. Mom led, Dad supported, Lauren cried. The classic Richardson family formation. The same dynamic that had been suffocating me for 30 years, only now I could finally see it clearly. I didn't respond to any of their excuses. Instead, I simply opened the folder and pulled out the first document. I placed it on the coffee table between us, turning it so they could read the words printed in black and white. "Let's start with this," I said quietly. Mom's face went pale when she recognized it. The email from Grandpa, dated 8 months ago. And beneath it, her own reply. "Ella will be thrilled. We'll take her to the dealership next week. This is Grandpa's email from February," I explained, keeping my voice calm and steady, just as Grandpa had advised. $85,000. For my car. "And this is your response, Mom. You said you would take me to a dealership." "Did you?" "Ella, you have to understand the context," Mom started, her hands twisting in her lap. "You had just gotten divorced. You were fragile. We didn't want to overwhelm you with such a big gift. We thought it would be better to wait until you were more stable." "So you waited," I said. "For 8 months. And in that time, what happened to the money?" Silence stretched across the room. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the floor. Lauren dabbed at her eyes with her tissue. "What happened to the $85,000 that was meant for me?" I repeated. Dad cleared his throat. "The money went toward a car, just like your grandfather wanted. We followed his wishes." I reached into the folder and pulled out the third document, the one I had obtained from the DMV first thing this morning. I set it on the table next to Grandpa's email. "Whose name is on the registration?" I asked. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's mouth opened and closed. Lauren's crying stopped abruptly, her eyes widening with something that looked like fear. Dad's jaw worked, but no words came out. I tapped the document with my finger. "This is the vehicle registration for a Mercedes Benz C-Class. Purchased February 23rd of this year, 1 week after Grandpa wired the money. The registered owner is Lauren Michelle Richardson Hartley." My voice hardened. "My name isn't on this. Lauren's name is." The room shifted. I could feel the power dynamic changing, the carefully constructed narrative crumbling under the weight of evidence they couldn't deny. You didn't delay my gift, I said, each word precise and deliberate. You gave it to someone else. Mom's composure finally cracked. The tears that had been threatening spilled over, and words tumbled out of her in a desperate torrent. Lauren and Derek were in crisis, she cried. They had credit card debt up to their eyeballs. Collectors were calling constantly. They were about to lose their apartment. You were doing fine, Ella. You had a job, an apartment. You were handling everything. Lauren was falling apart. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. We had to make a choice, and we chose to help the child who needed it most. Dad nodded vigorously, backing her up. It was supposed to be temporary. We figured we'd sort things out later, maybe find a way to help you when everything settled down. Lauren was drowning. You were swimming. Lauren's plea joined the chorus. I'm so sorry, Ella, I know it was wrong, but you don't understand what it's like to be me. Everything is so easy for you. You just handle things. I've never been strong like you. I've never been able to push through the way you do. When Mom and Dad offered to help, I was desperate. I said yes. I shouldn't have. I absorbed the assault of excuses, letting their words wash over me without interrupting. When they finally fell silent, I spoke quietly. You chose Lauren. It wasn't a question, just a statement of fact. That's not, Mom started. You had $85,000 designated for me, and you chose Lauren. Mom was crying openly now. Ella, you've always been the strong one. There it was. The phrase I had heard my entire life, weaponized against me one final time. You've always been so capable, Mom continued, so independent. Lauren needs us. You never have. Something cold and hard crystallized inside my chest. Every time I hadn't asked for help was now being used against me. Every time I had powered through hardship on my own was proof that I didn't need them. My strength had become their justification for neglect. I stood up. I couldn't sit any longer, couldn't keep still while they explained why I deserved to be abandoned. I walked to the window and looked out at the silver Mercedes parked on the street. My Mercedes. Lauren's Mercedes. The car that should have been mine. Then I turned back to face them. Let me tell you about the last 8 months, I said, my voice rising, since you seem to think I was doing fine. I moved into a 400-square-foot studio apartment because that's all I could afford after the divorce. Michael emptied our savings. I started over with nothing. I took a step closer, my words coming faster now. I biked to work every single day. Rain, wind, it didn't matter. I couldn't afford a car. I skipped meals to make rent. I declined invitations because I couldn't afford a glass of wine. I worked overtime, weekends, holidays, anything to stay afloat. My voice broke, but I pushed through. And you watched, all of you. You saw me show up to family dinners with helmet hair and wet clothes. You saw me bike home in the dark. And not one of you said, "Hey, Ella, Grandpa gave us money for your car." Not one of you said, "Here, take your Mercedes." I pointed directly at Lauren. You drove my car to Easter brunch. You parked it right out front. You let me admire it. You let me ask about it. And you told me it was from Derek's bonus. You looked me in the eye and lied. Lauren's face crumpled. I didn't know how to tell you, she whispered. By then it had been months. I thought maybe you would never find out. I caught Mom and Dad exchanging a glance. That silent communication they had always shared. The secret language I was never allowed to understand. But this time, I recognized what it meant. They were hiding something else. Something beyond the car. What? I demanded. What are you not telling me? Silence stretched. Mom picked at her cardigan. Dad stared at his hands. Lauren's crying stopped again, and she looked genuinely scared. Is there more? I pressed. What else did you do? Mom spoke too quickly, trying to deflect. The important thing is that the car served its purpose. It helped Lauren get back on her feet. And anyway, the car isn't really the issue anymore. I froze. What do you mean isn't really the issue? The car is the entire issue. Mom realized her mistake too late. Her face crumbled as she looked to Dad for rescue, but he just shook his head slowly, surrendering. "Where is the car?" I asked, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Is it still registered to Lauren? Does she still have it?" Lauren broke into fresh sobs. "I'm so sorry, Ella. I didn't want to. Derek said we had no choice. Does she still have it?" I repeated. "No," Lauren choked out. "We sold it 3 months ago. The air left my lungs." I felt the floor tilt beneath me, the world shifting on its axis. They hadn't just given my car to Lauren. They hadn't just let her drive it for months while I struggled. They had sold it. My gift from Grandpa. My $85,000? Gone. "You sold it," I breathed. "Sold my car? The one Grandpa bought for me?" Dad attempted to explain. Lauren and Derek had gotten into more debt. The credit cards weren't the only problem. There were other bills, medical expenses. The car was just sitting there, and they needed the cash. Lauren added desperately, "We got $72,000 for it." It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it helped. I know it was wrong, I know. My mind raced through the calculations. $85,000 became a car. The car sold for $72,000. $13,000 lost to depreciation. $72,000 given to Lauren and Derek to pay their debts. Total benefit to me, 0. Total loss, everything. "Let me understand this correctly," I said, my voice like ice. "Grandpa sent $85,000 for me. You bought a car, put it in Lauren's name. Lauren drove it for 5 months. Then you sold it and gave Lauren the cash. And I got a bicycle." No one answered. "At what point was I supposed to benefit from Grandpa's gift?" I continued. "At what point did any of you think about me?" Mom attempted to recover. "Ella, please understand. We always intended to make it up to you. Once Lauren was stable, we were going to explain. We were going to find a way to help you, too." "When, Mom? When exactly? Were you going to tell me at Christmas? On my birthday? Were you going to wait until Grandpa died so he'd never know what you did with his money?" Mom gasped. "Ella, that's cruel, is it?" I didn't flinch. "Because what you did wasn't just theft. You let Grandpa believe his gift had helped me. You thanked him on my behalf. You said I cried when I saw the car. You made him think he had given me something wonderful. And every time he saw me, he probably wondered why I seemed tired, why I was still struggling. You let him think I was okay because of his gift." I gathered my folder from the coffee table. "That's not just stealing from me, that's betraying him." The blow landed. Mom covered her face with both hands. Dad looked away. Lauren curled into herself on the love seat. "I'm leaving," I announced. "I need to think about what happens next." I walked toward the door but paused at the threshold. I turned back to face my family, this broken, deceitful family that had hidden behind the word love while systematically robbing me. "I want you to understand something," I said. "I spent my whole life being the strong one. I never asked for help because I thought you would give it if I really needed it. I thought family took care of each other. But now I see the truth." My voice steadied, hardened into something I barely recognized. Being strong wasn't a virtue, it was permission. Permission to overlook me. Permission to take from me. Permission to choose Lauren every single time. Lauren reached toward me, her face streaked with tears. "Ella, please, we're sisters." I met her eyes without flinching. Sisters don't steal each other's futures. I walked out without slamming the door. I closed it quietly behind me and walked down the driveway, past the Mercedes one more time. I saw my own reflection distorted in its silver paint, warped and unrecognizable. I got into the borrowed car and started the engine. My phone buzzed before I even left the curb. A text from Grandpa. How did it go? I stared at the message, trying to find words to summarize the devastation. How do you explain that everything you feared was true, and somehow even worse than you imagined? I typed back slowly. They sold it. They sold my car and gave Lauren the money. We need to talk about next steps. I think I need a lawyer. I pulled away from the curb and watched my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror. The house where I had learned to walk, where I had blown out birthday candles, where I had believed I was part of a family that loved me. All of it had been a lie built on my silence and my willingness to sacrifice. But as the house disappeared behind me, something else emerged. Clarity. Cold, sharp, undeniable. If they wouldn't give me what was mine, I would take it back. Every dollar, every ounce of respect they had denied me, every piece of the future they had stolen. The old Ella would have cried the whole way home. The new Ella drove with steady hands and a clear mind, already planning the next move. I pulled over 3 blocks from my parents' house because my hands were shaking too badly to drive any further. The borrowed car idled on a quiet residential street in Beaverton while I sat frozen behind the wheel, trying to process what had just happened. They sold it. The words kept echoing in my skull like a drumbeat. They took $85,000 meant for me, bought a car, gave it to Lauren, and then sold it and kept the money. And I got a bicycle. The dam broke without warning. One moment I was staring at the steering wheel, and the next I was sobbing so hard I couldn't catch my breath. Not the quiet, dignified tears I had trained myself to shed in private. These were ugly, gasping sobs that racked my entire body, the kind that come from somewhere deep and wounded, somewhere that had been holding pain for far too long. I cried for every morning I had pedaled through Portland rain, arriving at work with water dripping from my hair and my clothes plastered to my skin. I cried for every meal I had skipped because groceries cost too much that week. I cried for every time I had told myself things would get better while my family watched me struggle with the solution sitting in their bank account. 8 months of unnecessary suffering. That was the part I couldn't wrap my mind around. Every hardship I had endured since my divorce could have been prevented. Every sacrifice I had made was avoidable. If only they had given me what was mine. But they had looked at Grandpa's gift, looked at me struggling, and decided I didn't need it. They had decided Lauren deserved it more because she cried louder, demanded more, made herself impossible to ignore. I had made the fatal mistake of being strong, of handling things on my own, of not collapsing dramatically enough to warrant their attention. My phone buzzed relentlessly during my breakdown. I ignored it, letting the tears run until there was nothing left but a hollow ache in my chest and salt drying on my cheeks. When I finally picked up the phone, I found a flood of messages waiting. 6 missed calls from Mom. Her voicemails were exactly what I expected. "Ella, please come back. We can work this out. You're overreacting, sweetheart. I'm your mother. You can't just walk away from family." Each message more desperate than the last, but none containing an actual apology, none acknowledging what they had done wrong. 4 texts from Lauren. "I'm so sorry, please let me explain. I know you're angry, but you don't understand how desperate I was. Derek and I almost lost everything. And the final one that made my blood boil. Please don't destroy our family over money. Over money. As if I was the one who had destroyed anything. As if $85,000 stolen from me was just a minor inconvenience. As if asking for what was rightfully mine made me the problem." 2 texts from Dad, both infuriating in their predictability. "Your mother is very upset. I hope you'll reconsider your reaction to all this." Both messages about Mom's feelings. Nothing about mine, protecting his wife, as he had always done, enabling the favoritism that had defined my entire childhood. But there was one message that cut through the noise, a text from Grandpa, simple and direct. "Come back to my house when you're ready. I'm here, I love you, and I'm not letting this go." I wiped my face, took several deep breaths, and started driving toward Lake Oswego. Grandpa was waiting on the porch when I arrived, and his expression crumbled the moment he saw my swollen eyes and tear-streaked face. He didn't say anything. He just opened his arms, and I walked into his embrace like a child seeking shelter from a storm. "I know, sweetheart," he murmured as I clung to him. "I know." Inside, he guided me to the kitchen and put the kettle on for tea. I sat at the familiar table, the same one where he had helped me with homework decades ago, and told him everything. Every excuse my parents had offered, every tear Lauren had shed, every manipulative word Mom had spoken, and the final devastating revelation that they had sold the car 3 months ago and kept the money. When I finished, Grandpa sat in heavy silence. His weathered hands wrapped around his teacup, but he didn't drink. Finally he spoke, and his words made my stomach drop. 72,000. That's what they got for the car? I nodded. But I sent 85. His eyes sharpened with the focus of a man who had spent decades managing complex finances. Where did the other 13,000 go? I hadn't even thought about that. I had been so devastated by the sale that I hadn't stopped to do the arithmetic. Grandpa opened his laptop, already running calculations. A new Mercedes C-Class costs around 65 to 70,000. I sent 85 specifically so there would be cushion for taxes, registration, insurance, all the additional costs. His fingers tapped against the keys. Even after the purchase, there should have been 15 to 20,000 left over. The implication hit me like a physical blow. There was extra money from the very beginning. And then they sold the car for 72,000, Grandpa continued. So that's roughly $90,000 total that passed through their hands. Money that was meant for you. $90,000. The number made the room spin. An amount that could have changed my entire life had instead vanished into Lauren's endless financial disasters, while I rode a rusty bicycle through the rain. Grandpa stood abruptly and began pacing, a habit from his years running a business empire. I wonder, he said slowly, almost to himself, I wonder if this is the first time they've done something like this. The question unlocked something in my memory. Old suspicions I had buried, moments of confusion I had explained away, patterns I had refused to see. Grandpa, I said carefully, when you gave money for my wedding, how much did you give? He paused mid-step. 15,000. Same as Lauren. I wanted both my granddaughters to have beautiful weddings. My heart started pounding. I only received 3,000. Mom said that was all you could spare. The color drained from his face. 3,000? I wrote a check for 15. I handed it to your father myself. I thought about my wedding 7 years ago. The small courthouse ceremony. The potluck reception in a friend's backyard because I couldn't afford anything else. I had convinced myself it was romantic, intimate, exactly what I wanted. But all along, $12,000 of Grandpa's gift had been sitting in my parents' account, while Lauren threw a lavish celebration at a country club. There's something else, I continued, the memories flooding back. When I graduated from college, you mentioned sending money for my future. Grandpa was already moving toward his filing cabinet, pulling out folders I hadn't seen before. He rifled through papers until he found what he was looking for. A check from 10 years ago. $20,000 made out to my mother. The memo line read, "For Ella's future, education fund. 20,000. I felt the bile rising in my throat. I had 40,000 in student loans, Grandpa. I worked 2 jobs through school just to afford rent. Mom said you couldn't help much. She said money was tight." His hands trembled as he stared at the check. "I sent this specifically for your education. Your mother told me you had scholarships. She thanked me for making it possible for you to focus on your studies." We spent the next 2 hours going through his records. Grandpa was meticulous, a trait that had served him well in business. He had kept copies of every check, every transfer, every piece of correspondence with my parents over the years. And as we compared his records to what I actually remembered receiving, a devastating pattern emerged. The college education fund. 20,000 sent. 0 received. A 21st birthday gift. 2,000 sent. 0 received. My first apartment deposit when I moved to Seattle. 2,000 sent. 500 received. The wedding money. 15,000 sent. 3,000 received. And now the Mercedes. 85,000 sent. 1 rusty bicycle received. I wrote the final number on a legal pad and stared at it until my vision blurred. Total stolen over 10 years. Approximately $120,500. $120,000. More than enough for a down payment on a house. More than enough to wipe out my student debt twice over. More than enough to have given me a completely different life. Grandpa sank into his chair, looking every one of his 78 years. "I failed you," he whispered. Year after year, I thought I was helping you. I trusted my own daughter. I never verified. I never asked you directly if you received what I sent. I moved to his side and took his hand. His skin felt papery and fragile, the hands of a man who had just discovered his family was built on lies. "This isn't your fault," I told him firmly. "You were generous. You were loving. You tried to help me every chance you got. They intercepted everything. They used your love as an ATM for Lauren." "Your grandmother warned me," he said, his voice cracking. "She always said Patricia coddled Lauren too much. She worried about you, said you were too quiet, too self-sufficient. She told me once, Harold, just because Ella doesn't ask doesn't mean she doesn't need." He wiped his eyes. "I should have listened. I should have given everything directly to you." We sat in silence, the weight of a decade of betrayal pressing down on us. Then something shifted in Grandpa's expression. The grief hardened into determination. The slump of his shoulders straightened into resolve. "No more," he said. "This ends now. I want a full accounting of every dollar I've ever sent for you. And if they've been stealing from you for 10 years, they're going to pay back every cent." He reached for his phone. "I know an attorney. Diane Marsh. She handled my business contracts for years. Brilliant woman, doesn't take nonsense from anyone." He met my eyes. "Do you want me to call her?" I hesitated. Calling a lawyer meant making this official, legal, permanent. There would be no going back to pretending we were a normal family. No more Sunday dinners or holiday gatherings or birthday cards signed with love. Just legal documents and depositions and courtrooms. Part of me still wanted to forgive, to smooth things over, to be the good daughter who kept the peace at any cost. That instinct had been programmed into me for 3 decades. But another voice spoke louder. "Being good got you a bicycle. Being quiet got you student loans. Being strong got you nothing but the privilege of suffering alone." "Yes," I said. "Call her." Grandpa dialed. "Diane, Harold Richardson, I need your help. It's about my family. And my granddaughter. Someone's been stealing from us. We have proof." He listened for a moment, then nodded. "Monday morning, 9 a.m. We'll be there." He hung up and looked at me with something like pride. "You're doing the right thing, sweetheart." I wasn't sure anything about this felt right, but it felt necessary. I drove home as the sun set over Portland, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange that seemed to mock the darkness inside me. My apartment felt smaller than ever when I walked through the door. The evidence folders lay spread across my kitchen table where I had organized them that morning. The bicycle leaned against the wall by the door, a constant reminder of what they had given me instead of what I deserved. I couldn't look at it. I couldn't touch it. But I couldn't throw it away either. It was evidence now, proof of how little they thought I was worth. I sat on my bed with my laptop and created a new document. I titled it Timeline of Theft and began writing down everything I could remember. Every gift that never arrived, every excuse my parents had made, every suspicious moment I had dismissed over the years. The list grew longer than I expected. Small things I had forgotten or explained away. A graduation card from Grandpa that mentioned an enclosed check, but the envelope had been empty when it reached me. Mom said it must have fallen out. A birthday dinner where Grandpa asked if I'd received his gift, and Mom quickly changed the subject. A Christmas where Lauren got a new car while I got a sweater, and everyone acted like this was perfectly normal. Patterns I should have seen years ago if I hadn't been so desperate to believe my family loved me. My phone buzzed. Another text from Lauren. "Ella, I know you're upset, but please think about what you're doing. If you bring lawyers into this, it will destroy everything." Mom is beside herself. Dad isn't speaking. "You're tearing this family apart. I'm begging you, please. Can we just talk? I can explain everything. There's more to this than you understand." I read the message twice, looking for any hint of genuine remorse, any acknowledgement of what she had actually done. But there was nothing, just more manipulation, more attempts to make me feel guilty for demanding what was mine, more framing of herself as the victim. I typed back a single sentence. "There's nothing to explain. You stole from me for 10 years. Then I turned off my phone and tried to sleep. I didn't succeed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the silver Mercedes parked in front of my parents' house. I saw Lauren's tear-streaked face as she begged me not to destroy the family. I saw my mother's desperate attempts to make excuses for the inexcusable. At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went back to my laptop. I researched civil conversion and fraud. I read about statute of limitations for financial crimes. I looked up Diane Marsh and found a website full of impressive credentials and successful case outcomes. My phone buzzed with one final message. Not from my family this time, from an unknown number. "Ella, it's Derek, Lauren's husband. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But there are things you don't know, things that make this situation even worse than you think. Can we meet? Tomorrow, if possible. I have documents. Proof. I'm tired of being part of this lie." I stared at the message for a long time. Derek, who had benefited from my stolen car. Derek, who had sat at family dinners knowing what his wife had done. Derek, who was now apparently offering to help me. I didn't trust him. I couldn't, not yet. But I also couldn't ignore the possibility that he knew something important, something that could strengthen my case, something that could finally expose the full truth of what my family had done. I typed back carefully, "Where and when?" His reply came immediately, "Riverside Park, North Bench, tomorrow at 5. Come alone, don't tell Lauren." I set down my phone and stared at the ceiling until dawn broke over Portland. In a few hours, I would meet with a man who might be setting a trap or offering me the evidence I needed. In 2 days, I would sit in a lawyer's office and formally begin the process of suing my own family. The woman who had thanked her grandfather for a bicycle was gone. In her place was someone harder, colder, more determined than I had ever been. They had stolen my money. They had stolen my opportunities. They had stolen my trust. But they would not steal my future. Not anymore. The law office occupied the 14th floor of a sleek downtown Portland high-rise, all glass walls and expensive views of the Willamette River. I arrived at 8:45, 15 minutes early, because nervous energy had made it impossible to wait at home any longer. Grandpa was already there, sitting in the reception area in his best suit, the one Grandma had bought him 30 years ago. He stood when he saw me, and something in his expression steadied my racing heart. "We're doing the right thing," he said quietly, squeezing my hand. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to feel confident and righteous and certain. Instead, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into an abyss I couldn't see the bottom of. The reception area was designed to intimidate and impress. Leather chairs, legal journals arranged on glass tables, soft jazz playing in the background. Certificates lined the walls, documenting degrees and achievements in successful cases. The receptionist offered coffee in a voice that suggested she knew exactly how anxious clients felt when they walked through these doors. I declined. My stomach was too tight for anything but the chamomile tea I hadn't been able to finish at home. At exactly 9 o'clock, the receptionist stood and gestured toward a hallway. "Ms. Richardson, Mr. Richardson, Attorney Marsh will see you now." Diane Marsh was not what I expected. I had imagined someone severe, corporate, intimidating. Instead, the woman who rose from behind a cluttered desk was warm and approachable, with silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a low bun and sharp eyes behind elegant glasses. She wore a charcoal suit with a burgundy blouse, powerful but not cold. Her handshake was firm and confident. "Harold," she said, greeting my grandfather first. "Good to see you, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Then she turned to me. "And you must be Ella. Please sit down, tell me everything." Her office was organized chaos, stacks of files arranged with a precision that suggested a brilliant mind at work. I noticed family photos on the credenza behind her desk. She had daughters, I realized. Maybe that was why Grandpa had chosen her. Maybe she would understand. I began with the dinner, the bicycle, Grandpa's confused question that had shattered my world. I walked her through the confrontation at my parents' house, Lauren's confession, the sale of the car. I laid the documents on her desk one by one. The emails, the bank transfers, the DMV registration showing the Mercedes in Lauren's name. My voice shook at first, but steadied as I spoke. There was something clarifying about presenting facts to someone who had no stake in protecting my family's reputation, no obligation to minimize or excuse, just a professional assessment of what had been done to me. Diane listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she set down her pen and met my eyes with an expression that made my chest tighten. "What you're describing is textbook civil conversion," she said. "Your grandfather designated funds for a specific purpose, your benefit. Your parents diverted those funds to another party without your knowledge or consent. Then they liquidated the asset and kept the proceeds." She paused to let the words sink in. "That's not a family disagreement, Ella. That's theft." The word hung in the air between us. Theft. I had thought it privately, felt it viscerally, but hearing a lawyer say it out loud made it real in a way nothing else had. "But I have a feeling there's more," Diane continued, leaning forward slightly. "You mentioned this might be part of a pattern. Tell me about that." I pulled out the document I had prepared over the weekend. My timeline of theft, organized chronologically, with amounts and dates and notes about what I remembered receiving versus what Grandpa's records showed he had sent. I handed it across the desk and watched Diane's expression shift from professional interest to genuine concern as she scanned the pages. The timeline included everything Grandpa and I had pieced together. The wedding money from 7 years ago, 15,000 sent, and only 3,000 received. The college graduation gift from 10 years ago, 20,000 designated for my education fund that I never saw a penny of. The 21st birthday gift that supposedly got lost in the mail. The first apartment deposit that arrived short by $1,500. And the Mercedes, 85,000 sent, one rusty bicycle received. Diane looked up from the document. "Have you confirmed these discrepancies with your grandfather?" "Only the wedding money and the college fund so far," I said. "But his records are meticulous. We're planning to verify each one." Grandpa spoke for the first time since we sat down. "I'll go through everything I have. Every check, every transfer, every gift I've ever sent for Ella." His voice was steel wrapped in grief. "If they've been doing this for a decade, I want to know the full extent." Diane nodded and made another note. "We need to verify each discrepancy. If there's a documented pattern of diversion over multiple years, that significantly strengthens your case." After the meeting, Grandpa and I drove back to Lake Oswego. His study was exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits: oak desk and filing cabinets and shelves lined with old business ledgers. The room where he had built his trucking empire through careful record-keeping and attention to detail. Now it would be the room where we uncovered a decade of betrayal. He pulled boxes from closets, folders from drawers, records going back further than I had realized he kept. There was a system to his organization, gifts sorted by recipient and year. We started with the wedding money, since that was the discrepancy I remembered most clearly. The canceled check was right where he expected to find it: $15,000, made out to Robert Richardson. The memo line read, "For Ella's wedding." The signature on the back was my father's handwriting. He had cashed it himself, deposited it into his own account, and given me only $3,000. I stared at my father's signature until my vision blurred. "Dad cashed it himself," I said, my voice hollow. "He kept $12,000 of my wedding money." Grandpa was already pulling out another file. "The college graduation gift," he muttered, flipping through papers. He found another check, this one made out to my mother. $20,000, dated 10 years ago. Memo: "For Ella's future, education fund." The room started spinning. 20,000? I had 40,000 in student loans, Grandpa. I worked 2 jobs through school just to pay rent. Mom told me you couldn't afford to help much. His hands trembled as he held the check. "I sent $20,000 specifically for your education. Your mother told me you had scholarships. She thanked me for making it possible for you to focus on your studies. We kept going. Hour after hour, comparing his records to my memories, building a comprehensive picture of just how thoroughly my family had been stealing from me. The full accounting emerged slowly, painfully, like cleaning a wound that had been infected for years. There was my 21st birthday. Grandpa had sent $2,000, a generous gift for a young woman just starting her adult life. I never received it. Mom had claimed the check got lost in the mail and was never reissued. There was my first apartment deposit when I moved to Seattle. Grandpa had offered to help, sending $2,000 to cover the cost. Mom said she would handle the transfer. I received $500. There was a Christmas gift from when I was 25. Grandpa's records showed a check for $1,000. I had no memory of ever receiving anything that year except a sweater. And those were just the ones we could document with certainty. There were other suspicious moments, other times when Grandpa mentioned sending something, and I had no memory of receiving it. Moments I had dismissed as miscommunication or forgetfulness, now recast in a sinister new light. I wrote the final number on a legal pad, then sat staring at it until my eyes burned. Total confirmed theft over 10 years, $120,500. That wasn't even including the Mercedes. That was just the historical pattern, the foundation of fraud they had been building for a decade before the $85,000 gift that finally exposed them. Grandpa looked like he had aged 10 years in the space of an afternoon. He sat in his armchair, the check from my college fund still clutched in his trembling hand, and I watched something break behind his eyes. "What else did they take from you?" he whispered. "What else did I fail to protect?" A memory surfaced unbidden, sharp and painful. I was 18 again, sitting in my cramped college dorm room, counting coins to see if I could afford both ramen and laundry that week. I had called Mom to ask if there was any way the family could help with textbooks, which cost far more than I had budgeted for. Her voice echoed in my mind. "Sweetheart, we're stretched thin right now. Lauren needs braces and your father's car broke down. Grandpa already gave what he could. We just can't do more." "You're so smart, Ella, you'll figure it out." "You always do. I had figured it out." I got a second job at the campus coffee shop, working weekends and holidays and late nights. I skipped meals to afford textbooks. I told myself I was building character, developing independence, learning to stand on my own feet. And the whole time, $20,000 sat in my parents' account, designated for my education, while I counted quarters for laundry. The rage that had been building inside me crystallized into something cold and clear, not the hot fury of betrayal, but something harder, something that clarified rather than blinded. "They watched me struggle," I said quietly. "They had the solution, and they chose not to give it." Grandpa reached for my hand, his grip stronger than I expected from a man his age. "No more," he said. "This ends now. We're going back to Diane with all of this. Tomorrow." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, then something made me answer. "Ella." The voice was male, nervous, familiar. "It's Derek, Lauren's husband." I went very still. Derek had benefited from my stolen car. Derek had sat at family dinners knowing what was happening. Derek had sent me that cryptic message about having information. "Why are you calling me?" "I need to talk to you," he said urgently. "Today, if possible. There are things you don't know, things that make this whole situation even worse." I laughed bitterly. How could it possibly be worse? A long pause. "Because the car wasn't just sold. Before they sold it, they took out a loan against it. They used your car as collateral to borrow $30,000. The floor dropped out from under me. A loan? They borrowed against my car? Yes. Derek's voice was shaking now. And that loan? It's still outstanding. They used the sale money to pay off credit cards and medical bills. The loan is still there. Technically, there's still $30,000 owed, secured against a car that doesn't exist anymore." The arithmetic rearranged itself in my head. $85,000 original gift. Car given to Lauren. $30,000 borrowed against it. Car sold for $72,000. Sale money used for other debts. Loan still outstanding. That's $115,000 connected to the Mercedes alone, plus the decade of previous theft. The number was staggering, obscene. "Why are you telling me this?" I demanded into the phone. "Because Lauren is my wife, but what she did is wrong." Derek's voice cracked. "And because your parents are making plans, they're talking about getting ahead of this, spinning the story, making you look like the ungrateful daughter who's tearing the family apart." "I can't be part of that anymore." "What kind of plans?" "I don't know the details, but I have documents, screenshots, proof of the loan. If you want it, it's yours. Meet me tomorrow, somewhere private." I looked at Grandpa, who had been listening to my half of the conversation with growing alarm. "Where and when?" I asked. "Riverside Park, the North Bench, 5 p.m. I'll be there. And Ella?" Derek's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Don't tell Lauren. Don't tell your parents. If they find out I'm helping you,